We acknowledge the first Australians as the traditional custodians of the continent, whose culture is the oldest living culture in human history. We pay our respects to elders, past, present, and emerging, and we respect their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship with the land. We extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. They share the memories, traditions, and hopes of the traditional ancestors with the new generations today and in the future. We would also like to thank them for looking after this land for thousands of years.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our next event for World Environment Day. I'd like to acknowledge the sponsorship from Amazon Web Services that has enabled us to run these sessions for free today. So they run a great program called AWS in Communities, and it's all about creating opportunities for communities to have access to, educational content and everything beyond. So it's wonderful to be able to be here to recognise World Environment Day. Some of you have done some of our other sessions with us already today, and that is wonderful. And today we are focusing on sustainability starts with you. And I've got my other hat on today coming from Australian Environmental Education, and my name is Karen. And today we'll just be going on that journey about really following up from our sessions today about the idea of the theme of World Environment Day, which is living sustainably and harmony with nature. So we've had our nature break, connecting to our environment. We've learned lots about some different animals and their features. And today we're going to also continue with looking at how to create wildlife friendly environments as well, and how we can live sustainably, not only in our environment, but in our everyday lives. So please put, there'll be some times I'll be asking things, you can put them in the chat. If you've got a specific question, put them in the Q&A. But if I'm asking a question, you're responding to that, just put those ones in the chat. So the first thing I'd like you to think about today is how you've interacted in the environment. So we're going to think about all of the things that we consume. So maybe energy, water, and even food. So let's start off with energy. How did we use energy today? Or how did you use energy today? Does anyone want to put in the chat some ideas that they might have, how they used those kinds of resources? I know that I've had my computer on. I've got my video camera on. I've used my light switches. Oh, we're thinking about energy in another way. So people have been running, so they have physically in their body how they're using energy. That's a great one to think about as well. So with our bodies, we need to make sure that we have food to provide the energy for our bodies. And if we think about the energy that we use from the environment, we've got someone using the heater in the classroom. Yes, certainly where I am, it's cold. Another person's using the energy from their body doing things like kicking. So both of those things are really important ways to think about. The fuel that we need for our bodies is food. The fuel we need for our energy is coming from different sources. I have solar panels and solar hot water, but when it's cloudy, I'm still using energy from the local environmental grid that a lot of the time is still coming from, say, fossil fuels like coal. We've got other people that have been doing things like using their voices, and in terms of other energy sources, they've been using the air conditioner, they've been using computers like an iPad. Some of our kids doing homeschool, you'll have your computer or your iPad watching the session here today. So that's one way thinking about both energy as in fuel for our body and energy and how we get that to run our households and our lives. Let's have a little think about water. So at the moment, in lots of parts of Australia, there is lots and lots of water around. So we've got what we call in some cases super saturated soil. So when we're getting more rain, that rain is running off. Whereas 2 years ago, we were still at the end of a drought. So our water usage was really important to think about preserving our water. Now we're thinking about how we can make sure that water goes to the right place and not maybe cause flash floodings or other floods. We've got our year 2 group is using the air conditioner to keep warm in the classroom. And someone else was saying that they're using their body, they're using dance. And maybe they're using that not only to for their body, but also to keep warm as well. So let's now think about water. So how you have used water today. As I mentioned a couple of years ago, when we're in drought, and Australia is a country of extremes. It's either really dry with lots of droughts or really wet with lots of floods. So it gives us an idea, two different ways of how we could use water. One respect, we're thinking about saving water, preserving water. And in another area, we're thinking about how we can make sure the water that does land is actually funneled to the right places if the soil is saturated. And that means that it's so full, there's no spaces between the particles of soil and sediment that the water can't soak in anymore and it flows across. And especially if you live in an urban environment, there might be footpaths, gutters, roads that are creating hard surfaces for the rain to funnel in to different areas really quickly as well. So that's the movement of water. So pop in the chat how you've used water in your life today. So you can think about either at school, maybe you saw the sprinklers on at school, or how you've used it this morning. I hope I come up with some ideas there. Someone's had a drink of water. Excellent. I've got my fabulous glass of water here for me to drink as well. So I've got someone's drinking water. A few people are drinking water. Oh, brushing teeth. Well, that's good. Drinking at the bubblers at school. That's another great one. We've got swimming laps. Oh, one of the teachers is drinking coffee. Well, that's good as well. Showers. They've had water with breakfast. Showers and cleaning your teeth. They're all excellent ones as well. So we might have had showers or baths. We might use it for the toilet flushing. Excellent. Washing your hands after the toilet flushing. That's an excellent one as well. Or washing your hands before and after you're eating too. Excellent work, guys. So we use water in our life every day. And it is important to think about how that water is used within the environment. When we take water out of the environment and when we put water back into the environment. We'll have a little bit of an explore of that as well. So what I'm going to do now is just share my screen and we'll have a look at some slides and I'll ask you some questions as we go through those as well. So the idea is sustainability starts with you. All the decisions that you make in your life every day can help make the world more sustainable and can make you be more sustainable in that environment. And we'll talk about some of the really simple things that you can do. It may be as simple as when you're brushing your teeth this morning that you turn the tap off and you don't leave the water running. Okay, so I've got a house here. Now, it is just an average kind of house. It's not too big, not too small. And I just want you to have a little look and see if you can put in the chat any things that you think that this house or environment is doing to be sustainable. Let's have a look what you can come up with. Oh, someone's asking if it's a real spider behind me. No, it's a picture. It is a water spider eating a fish, but it certainly is just an image of a spider. I'd be a bit frightened if it was that big. Oh, excellent. We've got some great things coming through about the house here. A veggie garden, solar panels. A few people have mentioned the solar panels, growing plants. Excellent. Yep, solar energy, growing plants and vegetables. Yep, great work, everyone. So we do have the solar panels on the roof there. Someone's also mentioned trees for shade. That is an excellent one as well. We've got more solar panels growing some own veggies. Now, you don't have to grow all of your food. It can be really tricky to have a garden that will grow everything that you might need. Even growing some herbs and, shallots and lettuce and parsley, those kinds of things can be really helpful too. We've got people mentioning growing fruit trees, some mentioning that the plants create oxygen as well. So not only do they create shade, they also produce oxygen. And there's been a lot of research that showed houses and suburbs that have trees going around them are far cooler in summer than the suburbs that are open and don't have any trees. So that's a really important one as well. The trees that are against the building provide shade either in the morning or the afternoon and can help the house stay cooler. You can reuse plants instead of buying them, which also saves you money. So the idea of being sustainable is looking at the environment but also looking at the economy and also looking at people. So you're a really important part of sustainability. There's no point putting certain things in place that makes it not a place that people want to live anymore. So it's creating this balance of how we live in our environment and our community and how the people use those spaces. So I'm loving all the things that you guys are saying there. So we've got plants creating shade, producing oxygen. The solar panels means we're not using only fossil fuel energy, we're using energy from the sun. I've actually seen some places that have little wind turbines as well. My in-laws living up at Coffs Harbour, they live off the grid, which means that they are not attached to the power. So they've got solar panels and a little wind turbine that helps produce electricity for them as well. Isabel's also mentioning you can use some of the seeds from the food. So that's right. If some of your plants grow and they end up seeding, so sometimes if you leave them in too long, they'll go to seed. If you can collect those seeds, you can actually plant them again. I love it even at home if I'm using shallots when I'm growing. I will cut the end off and it has the little roots. I can then plant them in the garden and they will reshoot. If I have a capsicum that I chop the edges off, I've got the seeds, I can sometimes plant that in my garden as well. Another person has been really observant about our house there as well and said there wasn't any rubbish. So that's really important as well, thinking about how you buy things. So at the moment, as of the 1st of June, single-use plastic in New South Wales in a lot of our shops has now been banned. So we can't buy plastic that we only use once. When I go to the shops, I also think about packaging. So sometimes it's nice and easy when I'm buying things for my kids for their lunchbox that I have lots of little packets that I can just give them. But if I use a reusable container or even a Snaplock bag that's 50% made from reusable plastic, even that can help reduce our waste. And we can use those over and over and buy a bigger container and use that as well. So sometimes it's just thinking might be a little bit more work for us in the mornings, but in the long run, it will save by reducing things like rubbish. And I know in the classroom and in the schoolyard, especially on a windy day, if you're on cleanup duty in the playground, all of those little bits of wrappers can actually end up all sorts of different places in the environment. So we've got a couple of people there absolutely agreeing with you using reusable containers. So every decision you make, from what you take in your lunchbox to school, can actually help make a difference. Reducing waste, putting your name on your little reusable container so it comes home with you. I even still use some of the paper bags sometimes, and then my kids can reuse that. And then when we're finished with it, I can actually put it in the compost bin as well. We've got some schools doing sort of a no litter lunchbox challenge. That is a great one. So for those of you who haven't tried that before, you can have a challenge at your school to have lunchboxes that have no waste whatsoever, that you're actually using all reusable containers, or hey, sometimes things like our amazing fruit comes in its own container. Think of a mandarin or an apple with a skin or a banana. They're great ways of being able to take food to school, and they've got their own wrapper. And one of the things that I'll be sending you later on is maybe doing a bit of a sustainability audit around your home, community and school, and looking for those things that we've seen in that picture. Do some of the local buildings or the council or the schools or even your house, do they have solar panels? Are there wind turbines and solar panels in the community? So maybe some of your street lights are actually solar powered. What else? You could be thinking about, are there rainwater tanks at home, in community buildings, at school? Do you have a veggie garden at home, or is there a community garden where lots of members of the community, especially in urban environments where people don't have access to lots of backyards, community gardens are a great place where people can come together and grow food and veggies together and share that. Someone might be really great at growing a particular type of veggie, and they might not be able to use it all. So if they can then share that with their local people at the community garden, it's a great way to be sustainable and reduce the amount of food footprints that we have and food miles. And food miles is all about how far our food travels from paddock to your plate at home. Or we've got some students here that have veggie gardens at home as well. And what a great thing to mention at one of our schools here. Ants and worms are great for the garden as well. So you could think about a worm farm, a compost bin. Now, you don't have to have every one of these features everywhere. It might be that a combination of a few of those are still a great way of reducing waste. We've got at stingless beehive as well, another great one. And we've got Luke Carr is doing return and earn competitions. Now, return and earn has been a really wonderful way for students and kids to make money for the school or for home. My daughter does return and earn, and she uses it for her pocket money. And she is absolutely great about collecting all of those, making sure they're clean, and pestering Dad to take her to recycle them. We've also got food scraps and compost for chooks or pigs. What another great idea. So depending on where you live, some schools will have chickens. I certainly don't have pigs in my area, but I do have backyard chickens, and they really help reduce the amount of food waste that there is as well. If you don't have a chicken, you can think about composting, and a lot of councils are bringing in new green bins that can cope with food scraps as well as just the sort of the garden waste as well. So all of these kinds of things are things that you can do to just be aware of what's happening in the area. So even if you don't have all of those things at home or at school, actually going around your community and looking out for these features, you might find that lots more buildings have solar panels than you expected. You might actually find your local community garden as well, and you can get involved. So great things that you're all doing out there, but it's great to also have an explore and look around. And I think I've got a picture of a backyard garden here. So this is one doing raised beds. So if you don't necessarily have a space to dig, you can actually build raised beds and fill them with soil. And we've got some lettuces and things here as well. This is actually creating a bit of a butterfly garden. So not just providing food, but also creating an environment for wildlife as well. We've got another school here that has been doing, they're going to start this week for World Environment Day. So tomorrow, trash-free Tuesdays. I love that. I'd love to hear how that one is going. You can also reuse things like your water bottles. They're actually creating a little rain funnel here. So the bottom of the bottle goes into the ground, and the water funnels through and filters into the soil. So a little bit of an automatic watering system there as well. So do think about your plastics that is there. So you've got ideas of recycling, but you can also reuse them as well. They've got another school started collecting soft plastics, and they're composting their school scraps. That is excellent. Now, I've got a picture of a tap here, and it's doing something. It is dripping. So what we tend to find, a dripping tap, especially around the schoolyard or even in your backyard, a dripping tap can waste 200 litres of water a day. So going around and doing what we call a water audit of your school is another great idea, because you are looking for toilets that are running on, taps that are dripping, either inside or outside, and it gives you an idea about how much water could be wasted or saved within your school or home or local community. Now, sometimes it's really hard to turn some of the taps off. Go get an adult and ask them if they can try to turn it off. And if not, you need to get a plumber in to fix that, because it's a lot of water to waste. Now, when we're in drought, it's especially important that we're being thinking about what we call water scarcity, so the lack of water. But at the moment, in a flood environment, when we've had, certainly in New South Wales and in Sydney, lots and lots of rain, we need to actually think about not adding more water to the environment. So if you've got a dripping tap, it actually could then cause all sorts of extra problems with the soil, and that might run off somewhere and cause some damage as well. We've got a few rain life water filters. I like the idea of that too. Now, the reason why we think about not only our water and pollution and what gets into the environment, because 80% of our litter ends up in our waterways, is actually made of plastic. So reusing our plastic, then or recycling our plastics. We've heard of return and earn, being able to take those plastics bottles back to be recycled, and also reusing soft plastics. And they're doing a lot of work about recycling plastics now back into the environment and using them in pathways and roadways and making other plastic things from that recycled plastic. So it is excellent to see. You may also have seen or heard of something like this before. This is really an important picture to think about. And it's the difference about how water moves to the environment, whether or not it lands on green park surfaces or whether it lands on hard grey surfaces like our roads and footpaths. So that's the idea that you've got a green filter or a grey funnel. So water, when it hits a hard surface, tends to flow quickly and often in a straight line. Water in our natural environment likes to curve. So we often will see creeks will have curves, stormwater channels will be straight. So water that's falling on our green spaces usually has time to soak into the ground. Now, at the moment, it's been tricky. As I said, some places are super saturated, so there's nowhere else for the water to go, but usually there's spaces between our sediments and our rocks and our things in underground where the water can move through. So you can plant things like rainwater gardens, areas that you know get a little bit flooded. You can actually plant gardens around those areas to soak up that water and stop it maybe flowing out into an area. So reeds and water plants, even making a pond, you can make it into a frog pond, but it actually will then slow down that water. Replacing hard pavements with something called permeable pavers. Now they've got little gaps in between them. So they still work really well as a footpath, but instead of it being all completely hard, there's little gaps around those pavers so the water can soak in to get to the plant roots underneath. Planting gardens on rooftops and planting more trees and vegetation because they soak up all the water out of their roots. So these are some extra things that you can do as well to help in those areas. This is another thing that we see a lot of councils doing as well, which is excellent. What we've got is a big net that's attached to a stormwater drain. So all of the rubbish that does blow or wash with the rain into our stormwater channels actually gets collected instead of getting into our waterways. But it's important that councils then go and remove these nets and actually will then remove the rubbish and hopefully recycle them as well. You'll see these all over the place. Now, next time you're walking around your school or your local area or around home, have a look about whether there are grates on the drains. So around most of the places, when you get to a low point in our gutters and drains, they will have a grate over it. Now, the grate also helps stop big bits of plastic getting into those drains as well. So if you have drains that don't have grates, maybe you can write a letter to the council and say you'd like some grates on these drains to stop big bits of pollution to getting in there. Or you maybe want to suggest that if you see one of a big stormwater channel that doesn't have a net or a physical barrier to stop the big bits of pollution in, you could actually, as a school or a community or as an individual, maybe write a letter or make a poster to tell the council why they should maybe put one of those grates in. So it's a good thing to have a think about, being able to actually stop those kinds of things getting into the waterway, which means that we then stop that pollution getting into our oceans as well. At every point where we can remove rubbish, it means one less piece of rubbish in our environment. And as some of you were saying, return and earn, trash-free Tuesdays, thinking about your litter at the school and at home, all of those things are great ways of removing. So recycling, reusing, or just thinking about how you buy certain products to reduce the amount of waste in there. So excellent. I love some of the comments that you're getting through as well. So we're thinking about water, we're thinking about pollution. I just want to show you a little bit of an experiment that I've got here. Now, I've got to make sure my lids are on very well. And it's just the idea of what gets in our water. So the big things that we have, the grates and the nets to stop getting in, we can protect our water. But there are other things that dissolve, which means mix into the water. And they are harder to stop. So if I hold this up here, what I've got here, this is an experiment and you can try at home as well. You don't need a bottle this big. At the bottom, I've got water and food colouring. Food colouring just helps us see a bit better. At the top is oil. And I'm going to turn this over. We can see that it's separated. A few little bubbles, blue bubbles going through. I'm going to give it a shake now. But what we can see really clearly, and you've probably heard this said a lot of times before, that oil and water don't mix. Okay, so we're seeing the blue bubbles of water drop out and settle back down into the bottom of the oil. So when we have oil in our environment, it tends to float on the surface above the water. Sometimes that means we can clean it up easily, but other times it's a slick that you can sometimes see. Now, I'm going to add some detergent. So thinking about, we use detergent all the time, washing and cleaning, washing cars. Even if we wash cars on our grass, we're hoping that the detergent will actually soak into the grass. Sometimes that can give nutrients to the plants. If we wash it on hard surfaces, those detergents are running into our waterway. So I've got to try not to drop the oil or the detergent. So let's see, if I hold it up, we should be able to see it go in. I'm going to do it this side. I'm going to move my hand so you can actually see the layers between the two. We should see the detergent running down. Oh, now that's when I wasn't paying attention. I put too much in. So we can see a layer of detergent here now. And let's see if I can still put the lid on without overfilling it. And I'm going to now shake it. So remember before when I mixed it, it never quite mixed. You still had a separation there. So we can see it here with our big layer of detergent sitting on top. Let's see. I start mixing it. All of a sudden, it's really quite blue, isn't it? We're not getting that separation. If I keep shaking it, I'm going to make sure my bubbles don't expand and I don't pop the top of the bottle open. But what a difference that the detergent mixes the water and the oil together. So it will eventually settle out again. But what we can see really simply there is that when you've got detergent with your oils and your water, they actually mix together. So instead of it being a separation of the layers, it allows the water and the oil to mix. Now, that is not great for any of the animals that are living in our freshwater environment, or when this gets to our marine environment as well. So again, one you can do at home or at school using food colouring and water, oil, and then some detergent. Test it out, shaking it upside down, and then put your detergent, and wow, what a difference we can see there. I'll just put this out of the way so I don't knock it over and make a mess. Okay, everyone, let's have a quick look back at our slides. We'll talk a little bit more about recycling. So really simple ways, separating all the products into different types. So a lot of the time our recycling bins are taking paper, glass and plastics all together, but some places will separate them out as well. I think if you've got anything that you can reuse, so I make insect hotels with all of my toilet roll holders. So by putting in bark and things like that, I'll show you an insect hotel in a few moments. So you can reuse all sorts of things. I've actually reused plastic bottles and I've cut a mark into them and I use them as scoops for my chicken food if they've got a handle on them. So there's a few different ways that you can be really creative and use a lot of your rubbish. So return and earn that you've also mentioned before. Any paper products, a lot of them you can put in your compost bin as well. If you're trying to do a garden and planting, you can actually put old paper and cardboard underneath the soil as what we call a weed mat, and that actually tries to stop the weeds growing through as well. So lots of different ways that you can think about your recycling, but also reducing and reusing those products. Now, I want to move on a little bit to our wildlife. We had a bit of a talk about sort of plants and trees this morning and amazing other animals. But now let's have a think about the sort of what we call biodiversity. Now, biodiversity means the variety of living things in an area. So it could be your local community or beyond. It could be all of Australia, all of the world. And there are millions of different species. But if we focus on being sustainable, the best place is to start locally. So start in your very own backyard. So I'm showing you now, this is my backyard. So this is what I call my spider garden. I've got some native plants like the kangaroo paws and some vines and some trees that have got bigger and some grasses, but I've also got some plants that were already there that are non-native, but they do provide lots of pollen for bees and butterflies and those kinds of animals. So I haven't dug up that habitat, I've added native plants to it. Just at the back there, if you can see, sitting in the tree is a pot, and inside is lots of seed pods and bark and paper bark. That is creating an insect hotel. And then I've also got a frog hotel across to the side here. And there are lots of ways, and I'll describe to you how to make frog hotels and create these habitat spaces. Some of them really small, some of them can be really big, like a whole garden or a whole parkland. And we are thinking about creating habitats for big variety of animals. So not just insects or birds or mammals, possums, pretty much everything that lives in your area, you can create a safe place. And all animals need food, water, and shelter. So this cockatoo is hanging out in one of my grevilleas, eating all of the flowers. This is a frog pond that I have in my backyard. I often will get lots of dragonfly nymphs living in here. And so when they go through their metamorphosis, which is a change, they'll have beautiful dragonflies flying around my backyard all through summer. I have this for frogs, but also just water for wildlife as well. Especially when we've had very hot summers, having lots of places where there's water for wildlife to drink from is very important. I've got this as a frog pond, but I don't often see tadpoles in there. But what I have to make it safe for frogs, and I think it was mentioned in our previous session, is somewhere for shade. So we've got plants nearby to provide shade. Lots of different layers inside so they can crawl out. So they might be able to crawl out of the pond because not all frogs are very good swimmers. So you don't need a lot of deep water, but you do need rocks and sticks for them to climb out as well. Oh, and here's our frog hotel. So our frog hotel are separate to a frog pond because not all frogs will live in water when they're adults. So tree frogs, guess what? They like to climb trees. And there are other frogs that actually like to live in the ground. So many of the tree frogs really like these tubes. So you can just do them what's called frog tubes and get different size and shapes PVC tubing and actually push them into the ground. And if you've got tree frogs in your area, they may find those. You can also do them like this with multiple shapes and size PVC tubes. With some plants, I've got bromeliads there, which hold a lot of water, and a lot of times frogs like to hide in the little hollows of the plants, but it's in a pot, so I can actually move this around my garden depending on where I think the best habitat for frogs are. Another way to use these tubes is to actually tie them to trees. If you've got a tree that you know have frogs in them, but there's also lots of other animals, you may want to tie the tubes to the trunk of the tree that provides a safe place from predators for those frogs as well. So remembering you don't need to have all of these things in your backyard, school or local area to be sustainable and to create wildlife friendly gardens, but you might think maybe of a combination of some of these. This one here is an insect hotel. So this is just in a terracotta pot. Here, you can use plastic pots. As I said, you can actually even just use toilet roll holders once they're empty to recycle those and get lots of the curled bark or little twigs and push them into the tube. And then you could actually make a big one out of that by combining lots of the toilet roll holders together, or use an old planting pot like this, plastic or terracotta. Anything that's got a hole on both sides can be great. I've got some gum nuts in there. We can see some curled bark, even some banksia, all sorts of different things. And it can be old seed pods, it can be fresh things that can create little spaces for these animals to live. Now, my insect hotels often get those little garden skinks living in there. So sometimes I'll have them there. Oh, yes, we've got someone that's suggesting you can use wattle as well. All sorts of different things to create little spaces. And as the plants die down, you can add more things as well. So lots of bark is great as well, but you certainly can add fresh flowers and things that you've cut too. Okay, so the idea of what we've got about being sustainable is thinking about a green city instead of a grey city. So solar panels, wind, lots of plants and vegetation. In your very own home, you can do lots of water saving tricks, and at school, recycling, and many of you are thinking about planting trees to create habitat and saving trees that are already there. Luckily, a lot of councils are understanding that even trees that are getting old are very important habitats because they create hollows for a lot of animals to live in. And it takes about 70 years for those hollows to develop. So they do need old trees. And I've seen some beautiful examples of the councils cutting down branches that they think are dangerous, but leaving the main trunk that's got the hollows in it. So sometimes it's a combination of making sure people are safe. We don't want branches falling on people, but also creating those habitats. So cutting down branches that might be dangerous, but leaving the main trunk that might be able to be a habitat. And these are all things that you might keep an eye out for next time you're exploring your local environment. So together we can make a big difference, starting in your very own backyard to your local school and community and beyond. All of the decisions that we make every day can help us become more sustainable. So thank you very much for joining me today, everyone. Let's just see if there are any final questions before we wrap up, or maybe you want to let me know about some of the other sustainable things that you have been doing around your home. But it really is a lot about keeping your eyes out, exploring your environment, seeing what else is already happening. If you've got nearby your backyard or school, you've got a really nice bit of parkland, you might want to talk to your local council about the types of plants that are there. And then you might be able to, at school or in your backyard, plant some similar plants, because some of our really little birds can't travel big distances between patches of habitat. So some little birds will only travel 50 to 100 meters between patch of habitat. So if you can create little patches, you can create a corridor for some of those wildlife. Oh, excellent. Thank you for joining me today. We've got lots of ideas to take back into the classroom as well. I will be sharing lots of extra information with you all as well. Lots of thank yous. I really appreciate that. And it's the little decisions that we can make. So you don't need to change your whole life, but if you change one thing each day, and it could be, as I said, turning the tap off when you're brushing your teeth, or it could be planting a little pot in the backyard that has some veggies in it or some lettuces. All of those little things begin and start making a difference. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining me today. And I really look forward to hopefully you joining further sessions today, but also following up. Please let me know if you've put any of the things that you've learned today in action in the next few weeks, next term, or even later in the year. I'd love to see pictures of what you've been able to create and achieve, or even show me pictures of things that you've already done. Okay, everyone, thank you so much. Enjoy your lunch break if that's where you're about to go. And remember, World Environment Day, it's all about living sustainably and in harmony with nature. So thank you very much, everyone, and see you later.